The person living in the walls trope is one of the most unnerving concepts in horror, exploiting the sanctity of the home to create tension and fear. These stories tap into primal anxieties about safety, privacy, and the unseen dangers that might lurk just out of sight. At its core, the trope subverts the idea of the home as a sanctuary. In most horror narratives, danger comes from external sources, intruders, monsters, or supernatural forces. The person living in the walls flips this dynamic by suggesting that the threat is already inside. This reversal heightens the fear of invasion and creates a pervasive sense of paranoia. The history of this trope is deeply rooted in folklore and Gothic literature. Stories of secret passageways and hidden lives have existed for centuries, often tied to tales of hauntings or Gothic mansions. In cinema, the trope gained prominence in the mid-20th century as horror began to explore the home as a site of terror. Bad Ronald is perhaps the earliest and most definitive example of the person living in the walls trope. As a made-for-TV movie, it brought the concept into mainstream consciousness, paving the way for future films to build on its unsettling premise. Bad Ronald tells the story of Ronald Wilby, a socially awkward teenager whose dark secret forces him into hiding within his own home. Ronald lives with his overprotective mother, Elaine, where he dreams of being a successful artist and creating a fantasy world called Atlanta, where he imagines himself as a heroic ruler. Ronald is bullied by peers for his strange demeanor, but remains close to his mother, who reinforces his delusions of grandeur. One day, Ronald has an encounter with a neighborhood girl, Carol, who mocks him. Enraged, Ronald pushes her during an argument, accidentally killing her. Ronald's mother, Elaine, encourages him to hide rather than face the consequences of his actions. This decision forces Ronald into a confined space within the walls of their home, setting the stage for his descent into madness. The physical isolation mirrors Ronald's emotional detachment from the world, amplifying his already fragile mental state. His retreat into his own mind and the fantasy world of Atlanta becomes a coping mechanism that spirals into delusion as reality becomes too difficult to confront. Elaine's decision to protect Ronald by hiding him reflects her denial of responsibility and her desire to maintain control over her son's life. However, when Elaine dies unexpectedly, Ronald is left to fend for himself, both physically and emotionally. Without his mother's presence, his repression manifests in increasingly erratic behavior. In the aftermath of Elaine's death, the Wood family, comprised of Mr. and Mrs. Wood and their 3 daughters, move into the house unaware of Ronald's presence. As he spies on them from his hidden space, Ronald becomes increasingly unstable. His obsession with the youngest daughter, Babs, begins, where Ronald believes that she is the princess of his fantasy land, and his goal is regaining his princess, and remove anything, including the members of her family, that stops his dream from becoming reality. Eventually, Ronald's secret world begins to unravel. The Woods notice strange occurrences, and Babs starts to feel as though someone is watching her. Ronald's mental state deteriorates as he becomes more brazen, stepping closer to being discovered. In the climax of the film, Mr. and Mrs. Wood make plans to go out of town for a couple of days, leaving the girls on their own. Ronald confronts Babs when she is alone in the house and tells her she is his princess. Ronald locks her in the basement and forges a note for her sisters to find, claiming she has run away. Both her sisters are skeptical of the note, but the police refuse to do anything. Eventually, the girls hear noises in the downstairs of their house. The older sister, Althea, notices one of the many peepholes Ronald has drilled. When she approaches it, she sees Ronald's eye staring back at her and screams in terror as Ronald breaks through the wall. The cops capture Ronald as he screams out for his mother, bringing Ronald's terrifying existence to an end. To me, the scariest thing about the subgenre of horror that is the person living in the walls is the creation of the home as a site usually of protection is now that of danger. By placing Ronald within the walls of a suburban house, Bad Ronald transformed the concept of domestic spaces into potential zones of terror. This idea would later be echoed in films like Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs, which similarly juxtaposes the surface appearance of a home with the horrifying reality hidden within. The trope's ability to subvert the sanctity of the home has made it a recurring motif in horror, exploiting the audience's fear of invasion and the unknown. In addition to its psychological depth, Bad Ronald influenced the way the person in the walls trope engages with voyeurism and paranoia. Ronald's hidden presence disrupts the lives of the Woods, the family that moves into his home, as he observes and interferes with their routines. This dynamic of an unseen observer manipulating or haunting a household became a key element in later films. For instance, in the 2016 film The Boy, the tension similarly hinges on the hidden presence of a character who exerts an eerie influence over the protagonists. The cultural impact of Bad Ronald is evident in the way it laid the groundwork for reinterpretations of the trope in modern cinema. Films like Housebound and Barbarian incorporate elements of Bad Ronald's claustrophobic tension and character-driven storytelling, while updating the premise to reflect contemporary fears and sensibilities. Even non-horror films like Parasite borrow from the trope to explore themes of class disparity and societal invisibility, proving that the person living in the walls theme extends beyond the horror genre. The legacy of Bad Ronald lies in its ability to transform a simple premise into a profound exploration of human psychology and societal fears. By weaving themes of guilt, isolation, and domestic vulnerability, Bad Ronald established a blueprint for the people living in the walls trope that has resonated across decades. Its influence can be seen in both genre-defining works and modern reinterpretations, demonstrating the trope's versatility and its capacity to evolve with changing cultural anxieties. Ultimately, Bad Ronald not only cemented itself as a cult classic, but also ensured that the walls of our homes, and the stories hidden within them, remain a haunting and fertile ground for storytelling.